pushed the button.
It's live.
Is it working?
Yes.
Hey, we did it. Awesome.
It says it's live. Wait, we'll see. I'm waiting for the stream to turn on.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stream. I have the lovely and talented Ian Kirkpatrick here from the Kirkpatrick channel. Ian, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. I am Ian Kirkpatrick, author, idiot, and loin streamer, which is ironic considering the topic of the stream.
Indeed, indeed. Today, we are going to be talking about Booktok, specifically spicy Booktok, and some of the nonsense and shenanigans that they have gotten themselves up to over the past few weeks. So Ian has been doing a series of reviews on all of the books that were banned from public schools or challenged in public schools over the past few months. And I highly recommend taking the time to go and watch some of those videos. Your insights are fantastic. And I don't always agree with them, but the fact that you actually okay, I'm going to go see what this is all about, and then sat down and read, how many books has it been?
16 to 20.
Yeah. And you've done 2 years worth at this point, I think?
Yep, I did 2021 and 2022.
Okay.
I should be doing 2023 next year. I don't know if I'm going to do 2020.
Yeah.
But then I also know that I'm going to read Forbidden. I think it was called Forbidden because somebody in my chat mentioned having stumbled upon that in their library when they were in middle school. And It's got incest, romance, hardcore in it.
Just what you want when you're in middle school.
Right. There's surprisingly a lot of incest in school libraries, apparently.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
And then I had two others that came up, and I can't remember what they are, but I already added them to my read list because I saw them recently. And I was like, well, if these books are being lined up next to these other books, I guess they're going on my list so I can get to the bottom of what it is.
I mean, here's the thing, right? You got to read some stuff for yourself before you're able to make a reasonable judgment. And I feel like a lot of the people that are challenging books or pushing back instinctively against books being challenged, because both camps seem really firmly entrenched in their beliefs about whether this book should be banned or whether it shouldn't. And most of them, if you just listen to the way that they talk, have not bothered to read it.
Yep.
They'll be familiar with some quotes on one side, or they'll be familiar with the general concepts and think that it should be protected or think that it should be banned because of the concepts. And, and they don't actually sit there and read the darn book. Just read the book.
Yep. I think some of them, the one I think that surprised me the most was Looking for Alaska, because it claimed that there was sexually explicit content in it, and there was none.
No.
The only thing that it had in there was a male stripper at the very end, and that was a short scene. It wasn't explicit.
Yeah.
It was fine for a school.
Yeah.
And I also think
that's one of the Green Brothers books, right?
John Green.
Yeah.
And then I think The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian was very appropriate for a teenager age group.
Yeah.
But I think some of these kind of just get thrown into the mix, and I don't know why they get thrown into the mix. They're just, there have been some really weird things, like Lawn Boy. No, but there's 500 ratings on Lawn Boy. Some of these books have less than 1,000 ratings. Why are they on there?
Yeah. They're not prolific enough for you to worry about. Why are you fussed?
And then you see other lists that other school districts that have Colleen Hoover on the list. And you're like, can we remove Colleen Hoover from middle schools?
There was was it a middle school or high school? I think it was a middle school that had 50 Shades in it. It's how the heck did a 50 Shades book get in a middle school library? How does that happen?
That's been on the ALA list. It was 2015.
Right. But it only wound up on the list because it was in some school somewhere.
Yep.
Who looks at that and decides this is appropriate for a middle schooler?
That's one of the things that made me go, I need to see what's on this list, because people are freaking out about this banned book list. But if you scroll down and you see 50 Shades of Grey, it's infamous enough that nobody should just be knee-jerking, protecting, or fighting against these. You should be investigating.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sir, we're not trying to censor anybody. We're just saying that maybe a 12-year-old shouldn't be reading this.
Which is then crazy. The
argument. Supervision,
Yeah.
If you want your 12-year-old to read it, that's fine. But maybe I don't want mine to. And neither one of us are in the school library waiting,
Yeah.
Okay, so a few ground rules before we really get into the meat and potatoes of the stream, right? Ian and I are going to do our very best to discuss the topic at hand in a way that is respectful of differing opinions and non-judgmental for people who view the world differently or like different things than we do. I think it's okay to say, maybe this isn't appropriate to have or do in public, and not be ragging on or knocking on somebody's preferences for what they like to consume in their own personal time, right? I think that we can have the discussion in a respectful way about this is acceptable for public, this is something you should probably do at home, and neither of those conversations are judging people for what they like or what they want to do, right? So I would ask that the people watching the stream or commenting after the fact participate in the conversation in the same way. Let's all try to be respectful of the fact that we all like different things and that it takes a lot of different kinds of people and different kinds of opinion to make the world go round. So, all right. So the way this stream started, or how this thing came to be, is I saw a video and it just popped up on my YouTube page of a creator called World, who did a review of a situation that had happened on Booktok. I think it was last week, it may have been the week before. I'm usually a little behind. I'm not real up with what the kids are getting up to these days.
It's probably better that way.
Yeah, it's for my own good. So World was commenting on a situation where a bunch of older women closer to my age, were basically harassing a 16-year-old. That's probably too strong of a word. They were making very suggestive comments and very suggestive or tittillating book recommendations to a 16-year-old on Booktok. And I know I've got it here somewhere. I had myself all set up and I thought I was being so clever. And now I've got too many windows open and I can't find it. Oh, there it is. Okay. So Worlds, I will put the link to their full video in the chat for you guys. But I've actually clipped out a little bit of it. This is not the full video. I've put the link in the chat. Please go and watch the full video. I'll make sure it's in the description. But I'm going to put their video on the screen so that we can talk about it.
The motorcycle community on TikTok has been infiltrating a particular side of Booktok, which is specifically the romance readers. More specifically, the dark romance readers. Women on Booktok, and when I say women, I mean the ones with a mortgage and 2.5 kids and a full-time job. They're the ones that are drooling over the men on BookTok. Usually some dude will post a video about how they bought like a random dark romance book, and the dark romance girlies come in herds. They are anything but subtle about their intentions. This in itself isn't an issue because these men are above the age of 18 and they're the ones holding up a copy of Haunting Adeline. Therefore, they knew what they were asking for. They knew what they were getting themselves into. Unfortunately, recently.
Okay, so I agree that if you're sitting there tagging Booktok, holding up a copy of Haunting Adeline, and if you're not familiar with the subject matter of Haunting Adeline, in order to not get my channel demonetized, I'm not going to go over the trigger warnings. Let's just say it is not safe for work.
It's not even just not safe for work. It's very extreme. It's extreme. Very toxic.
Yeah, it's really extreme. So I feel like if you are an adult and you are on TikTok, intentionally tagging Booktok, intentionally holding up this book that is known to be explicit, you've got a copy in your hands, you have the opportunity to read it, I feel like that's an invitation to me.
I would say so, because when you're holding up a book, like think about it with any other book, like when you hold up a book on your channel because you talk about books, or even post the image on your screen so that people can see it, you're inviting people, go find this is what it looks like, this is what I'm talking about today, go and do it. So it is an invitation, whether you say it or not. It's implied.
Yeah, it's an implied invitation. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind, that this is a thing that is like a trend on Booktok, where bikers are going and buying these really explicit, very we'll say risque. That's probably the nicest way to describe it. Very risque adult novels. And I'm not judging you if you like those. Like, I read some really hardcore horror. And intentionally like baiting that interaction with the Booktok girlies. All right, here we go. Here's the rest of it.
A video was posted by a 16-year-old boy who just so happened to own a motorcycle. But the kid, he was making a joke about how Booktok is like obsessed with motorcycle people now, and he was showing the books that he likes to read. And the books in question were The Hunger Games, the entire series, and the entire Maze Runner series. But the comment section under the 16-year-old boy's video, it was a disaster. And there were two reasons why it was terrible. And I'm going to start with the lesser of the two evils, if you don't mind. A lot of the comments were infantilizing the shit out of this boy because he was pure and innocent for liking The Hunger Games and Maze Runner. Like, The Hunger Games and Maze Runner are perfectly acceptable books to read, especially when you're 16 years old. Huh?
Okay, so let's just talk about the terms pure and innocent in relation to adult women calling a 16-year-old boy pure. Now,
that feels like a fetish to me. I'm going to be honest.
Okay, it's not just me, because that felt
because like partially, so somebody in the chat right now has been posting a couple of pages of Haunting Adeline in the chat so we can all suffer together.
Ah, well,
like in
generous.
the server. So we've seen it. But in general, I've seen enough of these books. Like even when you go to The Pawn and the Puppet, which the Pawn and the Puppet itself wasn't the fetishy one, but the second book was.
Yeah.
But in a lot of these thirsty books, there's a focus on the innocence of one of the characters and the corruption of that one character by the other one.
Yeah.
And that is what's in Haunting Adeline, is that I want to break you. I want to corrupt you. You are so innocent.
Yeah.
And so that's what that feels like when they're talking to the child, is it's a continuation of that fetish where it's the character who is the younger, innocent one. Yeah. They're infantilizing it because that's what the narrative of these books does.
Yeah. So if it were a man in his 30s or 40s telling a 16-year-old girl how pure she was and how innocent she was, nobody would think that that's okay. Nobody would. Like, none of us would look at that and go, oh yeah, whatever. They're just, you know, it's just banter. They're making a joke. No, they're not. No, they're not. I'm sorry. They're not. No, they're not. Okay.
And then it's like, because you can't even say it's a joke when it's the content of the full of these books.
Yeah.
Like stuff like Haunting Adeline is entirely about corrupting the innocent and highlighting the innocent, just like it is. I think it's the same thing in Haunting Adeline. They'd have to correct me in the chat because we haven't gotten that far into it. But I think it highlights the size difference too. And that's because that is a thing that they want to focus on, that they are attracted to. Yeah. So then if you are doing the, oh, you're so innocent, oh, you're so pure, I'm going to dirty you, that is a focus. So it's not a joke.
The reason we keep coming back to this Haunting Adeline book is that is the book that these women were recommending to this 16-year-old boy. They're like, oh, that's cute. You like the Hunger Games. Come back to me when you've read Haunting Adeline and you're a real
become a man. Yeah.
All right, let's carry on.
Since when was The Hunger Games not a real book? I'm so confused. The comments were just super pretentious on that end because for whatever reason, those aren't real books. Now, my second issue with the comments were the disgusting things that people were saying to the 16-year-old boy. A lot of grown-ass women were recommending him to read various eroticas and dark romance books.
Yeah.
I'm not laughing. This isn't funny. There were even comments telling other people not to corrupt him or break him in. I couldn't find a lot of like these really depraved comments out in the wild because thankfully it's been buried under an influx of comments calling people out.
It's not just been buried. They went back and deleted them. They got called out by people in their own community, which good on them. Let her rip. And if not recognize that they were in the wrong, at least recognize that other people thought they were and went back and deleted a lot of the comments that were there.
And
I know they were there because I've seen screenshots of them, and I've read every single comment on that list, and there are 5,000 of them, more than that now.
I feel like this is part of the course with a lot of this, because I know that it happened with the hockey player where there was a lot of comments and then stuff kind of hit the fan and then people started deleting it.
Yeah.
And I know even a couple of years ago with a couple different stories I saw with authors behaving badly where they were like responding to reviews on Goodreads, where if I go back now and I look at the
they're not
blog,
there.
If I look at the blog posts of those, they're all deleted.
Yeah. Because, we can't be held accountable for our actions and the things that we say to other human beings. You know what? I shouldn't be so snarky. Recognizing that you've made a mistake and making an effort to at least stop contributing is probably a step in the right direction. I shouldn't be so snarky. Yeah, I'm just really cynical about the whole thing.
This happened too with a couple of months ago. There was this tag about clean fiction going around Twitter.
Yeah, and then, I remember.
Yep. And then I started looking into it because there were all of these smut writers that were jumping on this tag and then just being disgusted that anybody would even try to start a clean tag.
Yeah.
And so then when I got to the bottom of the tag, it was a teenage girl who just wanted to find clean fiction.
Yeah.
And when I started pointing out that it was a teen girl, a lot of them started deleting their posts saying, I didn't realize that it was a teenage girl.
Yeah. Because you didn't bother to look. You're so far buried in your ideology that you didn't bother to look at who you were swinging at before you swung.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, let's carry on.
But I watched various other TikTokers talk about this, and apparently it was really bad. Like, some of the comments, they were like really, really, really bad. And the cherry on top of this shit sandwich is that this kid had his age in his bio.
I did verify that it's there. It's still there. So yeah, he disclosed his age in his bio. I would also argue, having watched the original TikTok, if you in your 30s cannot tell that young man is too young for you, you're not paying attention. I'm sorry, you're just not.
When you're 20, somebody that's high school age looks like a baby.
He's built like a 16-year-old. Like he looks young. Like I don't know how you could. And maybe this is just me being an old woman, because we're getting up there in age. But like the second I saw him, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a kid. Like, yeah, that's a kid. How can you not know?
Well, if he's holding up books like Maze Runner and The Hunger Games, like, you know what he's interested in and you know where he's at.
And it was unironically too. Like, he was so into it. He was trying to do the trend and like fanning the books out, and it was so cute. It's like a puppy trying to show you their doll. It's like, look at what I found. I can do this too. And it was adorable, just like you would want it to be. Like, go be 16, and talk to other 16-year-olds about the awesome books that you love. I don't understand. I don't understand. I don't understand how you can look at somebody that looks like that's disclosed that they're 16, that half of the other posts on his page are about waiting to get out of school or wanting a day off from school so he can go ride his motorcycle, and not realize that you're talking to a kid.
So I have a couple of questions of this, because at some point you have to stop assuming that there is ignorance. Now, I don't want to do that on certain people, because I think there are certain ignorance. There are some that are ignorant and there are some that are not. But I have to present some ideas. Like, have you heard about the book After, the book series After?
Mm-mm.
So it's One Direction fan fiction that was turned into an actual published book. There are like 5 books in the series.
Oh, that creeps me out.
It now has a movie.
With the real people.
It was written by like a 30-something-year-old woman while she was married, about one of the One Direction people while they were 16 or 17.
Mm-mm.
And it was posted to Wattpad. So like, this is common. Even with older women, they know that they're underaged. And in some cases, it's fan fiction that it doesn't matter.
Do you think that... How do I put this? Do you
again, I said I wanted to be really careful on it, but I feel like there's parallels.
Yeah, I think you're right. I tend to give people the benefit of the doubt. I tend to assume ignorance rather than malice.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that they think it's okay because they're women and the target of their predatory behavior is male?
In some cases, I think it could be that.
Yeah.
Because I've seen enough conversations, and I'm not going to assign to anybody, but I do think that there is a culture around the discussion. It's the best beer. Let's be real. But I think there is a culture around the discussion of like sexual abuse on men, where a lot of the time it turns into, well, obviously he liked it because he's a man. Obviously no man would ever say no to a hot chick.
That's not how bodies work.
It's not how bodies work. But I don't know if you've seen that conversation. I've seen that conversation a lot.
Yeah, I have. Yeah. Even if for some bizarre reason you're okay with predatory behavior from a woman to a dude, like it's still a minor, it's still a child. Like how? I don't understand. I don't understand. Yeah. Okay.
Another thing that stood out to me in listening to her talk was them saying, hey, go and read this book without actually telling him what is in the book. And
yes,
I've seen that. And even just with other bikers, even if they're adults, when you say, go and read this thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's predatory behavior, whether it's a child or an adult, because I saw the same thing with The Wild by W. Webster. What's her name? Something Webster.
Right. Okay.
So The Wild is extreme content. It includes incest. It includes underage stuff going on.
Okay.
It includes forced situations going on.
Okay.
And in the book, there's a note at the end that says, do not tell people what is in this book because it could stop them from finding their next favorite book. If you go to the page, the Goodreads page, it hides everything that is actually in that book that would be extreme content, because
that is the part that feels predatory to me.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
The intentional bait and switch is what feels predatory.
Where they just say, go and read this thing, knowing what is in the thing and not warning people.
I don't think that it's necessary. So how do I put this? I don't think when I'm recommending, oh, you should watch this movie, oh, you should read this book, I don't think it's necessary to be like, but be careful, it might offend you if you don't like blah, 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 blah. Like, I don't think that that's necessary. I think intentionally hiding what you know is explicit content, potentially offensive content, potentially hurtful content. I think intentionally hiding that and then asking other people to cover it up, to hide it, to intentionally mislead people, to bait and switch them into reading, that I have a problem with. That feels predatory to me.
I agree with
not
that.
disclosing, oh, you should read this book, The Wild, and then not going on to be like, oh, it's really raunchy, it's really extreme. Like, I don't think that that's necessary, but intentionally hiding it, I agree with you. I think that that's predatory.
I think that's the big thing for me, is because you don't have to give a warning for every little thing that's inside of a book. But if somebody holds up the Hunger Games and then you say, go read this other book that you know is intentionally way different than that book that you know is their preference, that's way different than if somebody holds up maybe a Haunting Adeline and then you say, go read The Wild. You don't have to warn them; they're going to be fine.
Right? They're already in it. You know, they're already invested.
If you got like these bunches of bikers that are just looking at this thing now, completely ignorant to what you're doing, and then you go, "Oh, look at this extreme thing." Yeah, that feels predatory to me.
I agree. So yeah, the how do I put this? I don't even think I need to ask that, because I feel like I already know that you're going to agree with the statement. Recommending explicit adult content, specifically extreme explicit adult content, to a person that you know is underage is a form of sexual abuse against a minor.
Yes.
I believe that. I think intentionally, like, encouraging them, promoting it, pushing them towards it, applying social pressure in that direction feels like grooming.
Yes, I agree.
So now that we're all on the same page about what that is, let's talk about let's talk about the come back when you're 18 stuff. Right. So when I was, oh goodness, it was probably like the tail end of high school or my early 20s. It's hard to pin down pop culture stuff in your timeline after a certain point. And when you get to the 20-year mark, it starts getting real hard. So there was a countdown, like basically a national countdown, to when Britney Spears turned 18.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in a lot of men's magazines. Radio shows were laughing about it because they're like, oh, well, 3.5 months till Britney Spears is 18. And it struck me as odd then. At 40, it's not odd, it's gross. Like, like, are you really just like waiting until, like, do you really think that there's a difference between mentally and emotionally between 17 and 364 days and their 18th birthday?
Yeah. See, what it feels like to me is it's a countdown to when my attraction to them is not a crime.
Yeah.
Because even if, like, even if they're 18 and you're like 28, you're still going to be judged by your friends for dating somebody that immature, that much younger than you, and taking advantage of them.
Yeah. The vastness of difference between life experience between an 18 and 28-year-old. Like, I'm not saying don't love who you love, but like maybe consider the difference in life experience and therefore the power imbalance in that relationship. And how do I put this? You don't process information the same at 18 as you do at 28. You just don't.
And it's not even about that specifically if they're just counting down until it's legal, because they're obviously already looking at that person from whatever point that person came into their mind, whether it's 14 or 15 or 16. If they're counting down to 18, they've been watching them since before that. So it's not even about
you're just waiting until you don't go to jail at that point.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Golnath, I think, I don't know how to do this.
If you click the comments, that should pop them up on the screen.
Hey, there we go. So Golnath says, I feel like a lot of people heavily fetishize teenagers, and their media suggests that too. Yeah, so I didn't watch Euphoria, but I did see adverts for it, and the sexualization of characters that were meant to be in high school was over the top. Like, it was a lot. And you can say all day, oh, well, it's a show about teenagers meant for teenagers. Was it?
And
was
see,
it?
I have to wonder on that too, because that comes up a lot with the defenses of the ALA books, which is, well, of course there's going to be sex in ALA or in these books about teenagers because teenagers have sex. But there seems to be an exuberant amount of sex in a lot of these books that are actually being challenged. It's not like a regular amount. And then when you say, well, we have these expectations, there's one thing of preparing teenagers if they have sex so that they don't irresponsibly have it. There's another thing that it's like encouraging it and saying it's normal. And if you don't have sex as a teenager, then you're kind of a weirdo.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not sure how to like fact check, because if you're looking at stuff like Euphoria or all of the other dramas that really focus on having sex and that's all that they're doing, how much of that is normalizing that is what you're kind of expected to do?
Well, I mean, and it's things like the stuff that gets brought up every time that the vampire trend comes back, right? Because that rolls back through about every 10 years, and it's always this like many 100-year-old dude and a 16 or 17-year-old girl. Always. Mm-hmm. Don't know why, but she's always like 16, 17. She's never like 30. Somebody that he could actually like potentially have some kind of conversation with. She always has to be that like 16-year-old, 18-year-old where their emotions are all like way over the top and out of control.
Well, that's how it starts getting like super weird when you think about, okay, so you're 107 and how many times have you been through high school and you can still stand like sitting here. Have you talked to high schoolers?
No, thanks.
One of my favorite.
Go out and hug the sun. No,
I shouldn't say favorite things, but a mind-blowing thing is like sometimes listening to adults read actual YA books where the emotions are super high for really insignificant things.
Yeah.
But it's just, have you talked to a teenager? They freak out about like the smallest thing is the end of the world.
Yeah. That's why I tell people, like, if people reach out to me and they're like, hey, can you read and review my book? It's a YA blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't read YA. And it's not that I have a problem with YA books. It's that I am 41 years old and I cannot relate to YA characters. I just can't. I cannot get in that emotional headspace. I'm incapable of doing it. Mm-hmm. I know when I was 17, 16, 19, I know I was there right alongside them, feeling all the extreme emotions. Everything was the end of the world. But I'm not there now, and I can't relate to characters like that. And I will review a book poorly because they will feel childish, but they're supposed to. It's for teenagers.
Yep.
Like, The Hunger Games and Maze Runner.
So then how much of that do you think is also affecting this, where this show like goes back to Euphoria saying, this show is for teenagers, but is it really for teenagers? I'm thinking of stuff that's like, so I read Paper Princess a couple of years ago, and I mentioned this before, but I did want to bring it up because the main character is 17 years old, and she is a stripper with a fake ID, and then her parent dies somewhere, and then a parent friend comes in and says, I'm going to be your new daddy, and takes her away.
Yeah.
And then now it's just this sexualized situation in this house with 5 brothers.
Yeah.
And who is that for? Because that's not presenting a situation that is for teenagers that teenagers can relate to.
Yeah.
But if you call it a YA because she's 17, but that feels like what a lot of these things like Euphoria are doing, where it says, well, this is the age of the protagonist, so clearly it is for this age group.
But it's not.
And then you look at stuff that you're reading where you're clearly sure that this is YA because it feels immature, for that age bracket.
Yeah. But there's a bunch of sex in it, so they mark it as adult.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's a, how do I put this? There's a trend towards, if it has sex and swear words, it must be an adult novel, but their characters are acting like teenagers. If it's that the characters are teenagers, even if there's a bunch of sex and swear words, they will mark it as for teenagers, and that doesn't make sense.
Is that because the adults have all of the money, and so then the adults are buying these YA, and so they're like, well, we're going to chase where the money is at, so we're going to buy these YA books that have sex in them.
I don't know. How do I put this? Everybody says, oh, it's all these 30-year-old women on TikTok. I would be really interested to see what the demographic breakdown is on the readers of explicit YA books like ACOTAR.
I know that an article I read, I think earlier this year somewhere, said that the readership demographic for YA was like 53% women over 20.
Yeah. Yeah, I would even stretch that up to like 22. I would stretch that up to 22 because you're still kind of figuring out who you are. Like, you're still college aged up until about 22. Yeah, I would stretch that up to 22 if it were me making those brackets. But yeah, I'd be really interested to see what that demographic breakdown is. Where. So yeah, they're over 20, but where over 20? Are they 23?
I know that it had
28?
A group. I know it had a grouping. I just didn't want to super misquote it, so I kind of gave a very vague.
But yeah, I think that that's really an interesting thing to think about and to look at, and maybe the answer to the question we're all posing is maybe just if you're going to write books for teenagers, you make the content appropriate for teenagers. And if you're going to write books for women in their 20s, you don't label it as for teenagers. Maybe that's a thing. Maybe don't say this is a YA book when in chapter 2 she's given a fairy a blowy. Maybe we don't do that.
See, and I think there was that going on too. So what did you think about, I think ACOTAR was initially sold as YA and then it eventually got switched back over to adult.
It was, yeah. It was originally sold and marketed as YA. That is not a YA book. I haven't read it and I can tell you it's not YA.
Yeah, I can tell you it's not YA. I've read the first 2 and it only gets worse after the first 2.
I have not read it and I know it's not YA.
But so then that still had an impact on what is being sold as YA because you can see the ripple effects. And especially the Fae thing has now taken over the YA.
Yep. And everybody and their brother, regardless of age, is being slapped in the face with fairy dicks right now. Yep, that's the thing.
I'll take the vampires again.
Can we just have vampires back, please? Give me the pervy 117-year-old. I'll take that. Thanks.
At least the pervy 117-year-olds are afraid of hurting their high school sweetheart. Yeah. So they're like, we're gonna wait.
Yeah. Oh crap! I accidentally broke your arm. Oops. Go sit in this cell for a few days. It'll mend. What? All right. So I had some TikTok clips in response to the incident with the 16-year-old boy, right? And I think that it's important that we don't paint all of TikTok, all of BookTok, even all of the dark romance enthusiasts on TikTok or on BookTok with the same brush, right? Because there were, although at first, the first few people who jumped on that video with the kid showing his Hunger Games and Maze Runner books, although the first few were inappropriate, to put it mildly, there was a swift and ferocious response from other people in that same community pushing back and saying, look, this kid's 16, this is not okay, y'all need to stop, which is what elicited the wave of deletion and the intentionally like spamming comments to bury the bad ones, basically. Like even the people who didn't delete them, they were buried on purpose by the community to, I guess, attempt to protect this child. You can argue about the effectiveness of things like that because now you've made the thing go viral. And now, so now even more people are, who wouldn't necessarily have otherwise been interested are on his page. But yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge the, like I said, swift and ferocious response of the community against its own members acting inappropriately. And I think that that's really heartening. I think that I don't spend a lot of time on TikTok, so I don't know how often that happens, but to see it happen here was a positive thing for me.
I agree. I think it's something that in general has to happen and does happen, even if it's not really known about in a lot of these independent communities, because like YouTube is the same way. Is the pockets of YouTube, if a creator starts doing something sketchy, it's other people in that community, because it's that sub community that's only going to know what's going on. That has to call it out. And they usually do. There are so many different YouTube channels specifically that are about kind of policing other groups, or they're all in the subgroup that, and sometimes you abuse that power. And then other times it actually does stop an abuser and brings attention to an abuser.
It's the whole, okay, maybe there is a positive side to call out culture.
Yeah, so you just got to use kind of some nuance and checking out the situation before you just dogpile.
Yeah. All right. So here's one of the videos that I thought was really good about about calling people out.
This might be the thing. This might be the thing that makes me done with BookTok. This is Jesse, and as you can see, Jesse is 16. Before Jesse made this video,
I can't even see that kid's face, and it looks like a
child.
No,
he's wearing, right, that's what I said. How could you not look at him and know he's 16? Like, how can you not look at that and go, oh, that's a kid, I should leave it alone. Like, don't mess with that.
Yeah.
He's wearing a motorcycle helmet. That's the bike talk thing is, they make videos about their bikes and talk about their bikes, but it's all gestural. It's all miming because they all have their motorcycle helmets on. It's their thing. I would just like, I don't know how well you guys can see it, but I would just like to point out the text on the screen. So this kid made this TikTok in response to other people pointing out, hey, these comments are inappropriate. We're really sorry. So it says, I'm 16. I honestly don't see what the problem is. If nobody says anything mad weird, then we good. So far, it's been just jokes, and I think it's been pretty clear. To me, that tells me he does not have the emotional maturity to understand what they were doing and why it's a problem. And that tells you everything you need to know about the situation right there. He thought it was fine.
Because that's also how grooming works, is groomers will talk and say inappropriate things to young kids, and the kids will not know what they're saying.
Yeah, they don't know any better. So
that's why when you present something to a child that might be an ice cream, but you say, shut up and lick it. There's a question.
So yeah, the fact that he's saying, oh, it's been just jokes. The problem is those jokes were not appropriate for women my age to be making to a young man his age. They weren't appropriate. And the fact that he can't see that it was inappropriate and why it was inappropriate is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The kinds of comments that Jesse was getting. No school equals no problem. Ride a Booktok, girl, save a bike. Did the no
You see what I'm saying? This is the video that was directly before the one about his books.
Mm-hmm.
No school, no problem was the one directly before the one about his books.
School, no problem, not clue you into the fact that this might not be an adult man? What part of this picture says, please, come to my page and make sexual comments? And of course, they had to give him all the book recs, because what books did Jesse hold up? The Hunger Games and Maze Runner. Did that not, I don't know, clue you in to the fact that he might not be a fucking adult? And when Booktok did figure out that this was not an adult, they made comments like this. Oh, let's keep him innocent for now.
That's that thing that I was talking about of, oh, we'll just wait till you're 18.
Well, that's a dubious thing right there, because for now,
yeah,
it says
that they it's coming. I'm waiting
to corrupt him. Yeah.
Oh, we read adult books, 18 plus X-rated stuff, because of course those are the only books on Booktok, right? You guys know how many fucking teenagers there are on Booktok?
A lot.
Asking for a friend.
A whole lot.
And then the Booktok girlies are like, oh no, he's a baby. We must protect him at all costs. From who? Yourselves? And of course, there was the ever-present comments of read Haunting Adeline. This one was my favorite, though, because she told him to read Haunting Adeline and come back a man.
So the reason I included this particular TikTok was because I thought she actually captured some of the comments that they were making to this kid. And a lot of these, I went looking for them, and they were deleted at the time. But she's captured it, and I wanted to make sure that y'all understood. We're not exaggerating. We're not like making it up. We're not like blowing things out of proportion and being dramatic. Like it really is actual predatory behavior directed towards a child on TikTok. And facilitated by the application, by the way, and pushed up in the algorithm, and they made the video go viral.
And it shows that not just either leaning too much into the fantasy of whatever is their dark romance, because some of it feels like a continuation of like this role play, since they're recommending stuff like Haunting Adeline. So now they're just extending it into other people.
Yeah.
But it also shows a lack of self-control, that you can't tell the difference of when something is appropriate and when something isn't, is you're just going with that first impulse.
Yeah. That's that weird parasocial boundaries thing where like, oh, it's online, it's not real. But it is to him. Like, he's not going to forget this interaction with all these people. That he's 16 years old. He's still forming his personality, and that'll come up later. I've got another clip for that. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Something else on this is it makes me think of like the line that's not being recognized between adult and children. Made me think of the book Flamer that I read for the ALA, because there was a moment in there that's all about middle schoolers, like kids going from middle school to high school. And there's a moment in there when one of the scout leaders says something inappropriate around the kids. And then later in the book, it says that he was let go. And the kids all assumed that it was because he was gay that he was let go. But it's never addressed that he made an inappropriate joke to a bunch of 14-year-olds.
Yeah.
And I feel like too many adults at the moment end up in this situation where they don't understand what is appropriate and inappropriate for an adult to say to a child.
In case it's not clear, y'all, you should not be making sexually charged jokes with children. That's not a thing you should do. In case you didn't know, Greg, I doubt it. I don't want to get into the politics of TikTok, but I seriously doubt it. The people who were worried went and deleted their comments, though, and that tells you they knew that what they did was wrong. Mm-hmm. If you went and deleted your comment, you knew that what you did was wrong. All right.
Again, he's 16. Do you know what would have prevented any of you from going into this boy's comments and making inappropriate comments? Just not doing it in the first place to every freaking dude that you see on TikTok. I don't think I want to be associated with Booktok anymore. Maybe I need a new thing.
Can't blame her.
Between this and women going into men's comments and saying, read dark romance, read Haunting Adeline, that's what women want in real life. And the whole like Seattle Kraken thing, I mean, I think I'm done.
I don't understand how anybody can unironically say dark romance is what women want in real life.
Yeah. Yeah. How do I put this? I'm trying to be diplomatic here, so you'll have to pardon me if it takes me a little while to get it out. Because I'm trying to be as generous of spirit as I am capable while being terribly angry. This is my angry face, by the way.
I think your diplomacy helps level out just how blunt I am and not quite being able to craft as nice as you.
So I think if you are in a situation where you read an extreme body horror romance where people's hands are being cut off and they are sacrificing children, and you are convinced that that's what romance looks like and that that's what you want in real life, you need more face-to-face human interaction than you are currently getting. That's like a lot of the people, and I'm gonna probably be more personal than I ought to be, given that it's the internet. But if you're reading something like 50 Shades of Grey, and that is the height of romance to you, and you think that it's sexy because he's spanking her, and that all of his other behavior is all right because he's dominant, it's not. And that's not how healthy BDSM relationships function. And you need to go and interact with actual real human beings. I'm sorry, you just do. Go touch grass. go touch another human body, preferably with their consent, and over the age of 18, since apparently we have to say that out loud now.
Which I think again comes into this not recognizing what real people are like at different ages and what human responses are. It just feels like you spend too much time inside.
Yeah.
That you forget. One of the other things that I wanted to bring up when I was watching this video was that this is supposed to be a book community where they understand what book recommendations are and how they work. Yeah. And for me, when I think about book recommendations, it's like, okay, so this book contains these elements, and if you like this, then you'll like that. So you're not just recommending like, I like this book, but I like this book because I like these psychological thriller elements. If somebody reads a rom-com, you're not going to tell them to go read a psychological thriller without telling them it's a psychological thriller. You're usually going to find comparable titles to what they're reading if you have recommendations.
Yeah, in general, the way book recs go are, oh, hey, I saw that you liked these other types of books. Here's another one in this same vein with this kind of twist. And I think because you like these other books, you might like this. You don't look at some kid waving around the Hunger Games and Maze Runner and go read this extreme dark romance. Like, why? Even if he was an adult, why would you do that?
Yeah, because even if you're an adult, because adults often will, if they've had background situations or experiences where maybe they've been abused, so they avoid certain things. I know people that avoid books where there are miscarriages in the book because they've had pregnancy issues. Yeah. So you're not going to know that, like this person over here just likes to read fluffy rom-coms. They're an adult. Yeah. They could go and purchase your adult novels that are extreme content, but you know that they don't read those. So it would be sexual harassment and predatory to recommend stuff to them that you know they do not touch, and not tell them that that's what it is.
Okay, I think I differ with you here. If it's an adult, to me, if I say, "Oh, you should check out this book," you have the ability to read the blurb and decide whether or not that book is for you. I think between two adults having that conversation, I do not need to disclose those sort of potentially triggering things, even if I know you only read fluffy rom-coms, because I trust that you as an adult human being can go and look and see if that book is appropriate for you and your tastes and make the decision accordingly.
But see, if I come to you and say, hey, I like Legally Blonde, can you recommend me some books? And you say, yeah, try Haunting Adeline. If I trust you, I'm just going to trust you.
Yeah.
And so that's where I'm saying there's a breach of trust.
Get better friends.
Well, yeah. But if I trust you.
I'm sorry.
But that's like,
that wasn't very nice. Get better friends.
No, you're right. But that's what this situation is. But I'm trying to like defend the people that are adults that maybe trust somebody for their book recommendations.
Yeah.
And if they say, this is what I like, and then you recommend this other thing, and then don't tell them what's in it, knowing it's not what they're looking for.
Yeah.
That feels like a violation of trust. Yeah, they're going to stop listening to that person.
Yeah.
But you've also just lied to that person. So I'm not going to just blame the victim of the lies.
Yeah. I mean,
because I'm a fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on you.
Yeah, I feel like it's shitty. I feel like it's.
That's why I'll call it predatory. Like I'm gonna judge the person that lies to the other person.
Predatory, maybe.
I'm not going to hold them accountable in any way other than not listening to them. But I am going to call them predatory for lying to me when I trust them and they mislead me.
I guess my question is why? Well. I think you're probably using the word trust in a different way than I am interpreting it or understanding it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because like if you and I aren't that close, like if you, Ian, tell me, oh, hey, you should check this book out, you're probably going to like it. I'm just going to go buy it. I'm not going to read the blurb or anything. I'm just going to go read the book.
Yeah.
If it's some rando that pops up in my chat or comment or whatever, and it's like, oh, hey, you should go read this book. Sorry, husband's going to bed. You should go read this book. I think you'll like it. I'm going to read the back of the book. I'm going to look at some reviews. I'm going to check it out. Like, I don't know them. I don't trust them. You know what I mean? So I don't trust random people to me.
That's a problem for me. I don't assume people are lying to me until they actually show me a reason that they're lying.
I don't assume they're lying. I just think that most of the time there isn't anybody on the planet who knows me better than me aside from my partners. You know, there's nobody in this world who knows what I like better than myself aside from the men that I spend my life with. Like, I don't, you know.
So let me package this in another way that maybe is not as much as a stranger.
Sure.
If a publisher tells me that this is a YA book made for teens, I'm not going to go into it expecting graphic sex.
Agreed. Agreed wholeheartedly.
There was also, oh my gosh, okay, let me bring up Among the Hunted. I think that's what it was. So I found that book on Twitter because somebody posted about it. I think the author posted about it. And then I went to the Goodreads page and it had a low star rating because a bunch of people were mad about what was in the book. Now, the description of the book was about like pixies or nymphs or something that were running away from the Greek gods because the Greek gods got high off of having sex with the pixies or the nymphs, whatever.
Okay.
And so then it says the whole story starts.
The side story from True Blood, basically.
So it says the whole story I have no idea. I didn't watch True Blood or read it.
So vampires got high from drinking fairy blood and they got addicted to it and basically wiped out the species from feeding on them.
So it says that this story starts with one of them falling in love with Hermes. And then there was somebody else that was there. I can't remember where. And then the whole thing starts because one girl and her friend were at this club with Hermes and the other guy. And then her friend is murdered in front of her. And then so she spends the whole story running away. Now, what it doesn't tell you is that at the same time that she was murdered, she was also raped. And that fairy was also going to be raped. And that through the duration of the book, there are like 3 or 4 rape attempts on that main character fairy. That's what all of the people in the comments were getting pissed off about is because the inciting incident, while it was described in the description, they left out the fact that it was a sexual assault. And so they were surprised that the sexual assault was not mentioned. Despite the inciting incident was mentioned, they just specifically left out the sex. And that's because a lot of people will not pick up a book if there's rape in it.
Interesting. So you think that was a choice made intentionally for marketing purposes and to sell more copies of the books so that it would not be automatically excluded by people who found it uncomfortable. And therefore, they were intentionally exposing people who would have otherwise avoided it based on that topic to the topic by nefarious means, by non-disclosure.
Yes. And in this case, I specifically think it matters because it's the inciting incident, and you mentioned something else that happens at the same time as the inciting incident. It's a rape and murder at the same time. So why would you leave out half of that equation?
Yeah. Interesting. I wonder how much of that is, how do I put this? I'm trying to think of a way to articulate it. I wonder how much of that is nefarious intent on, I want more people to read the book, and therefore I am not going to disclose this, thinking that they won't pick it up. Like the one who said, don't tell people what's in this book. Because that was nefarious. And I wonder how much of it is that mentality versus trying to navigate around bots and algorithms that would have otherwise filtered out the book by putting the word rape in the blurb. Well, because I know books get pulled when they have specific mention of sexual assault and rape in their blurb.
You can still reference something of that in the inciting incident. But I guess the way that I see it, because we're obviously going to have a different...
Yeah, sure.
I obviously also don't want to assume malice at the first point of things, but I also think about how many literary magazines that I've seen and agents and publishers since, 2016, 2017 is when I've been looking at it and going to conferences and everything. And so many specifically list no sexual assault, period. And so I know that's what helped. Well, I say help, but that's kind of what tainted my view on, well, why would you leave out an event that happens at the same time? And it's specifically sexual assault.
Right.
Especially when sexual assault is something that comes up again and again and again throughout the book.
Yeah. So it's not just the inciting incident. It is an ongoing theme in the book. It's something the author was exploring as part of the theming of the book.
Yeah. And so I think that there could have been some sort of like mild reference to it, which is then what made me feel like it was more dubiously hidden. Yeah. And then obviously you see that in the comments where a bunch of people were like, I picked this up because of the idea and I wasn't expecting the sex. So then even when you hide that kind of stuff to expose unsuspecting people, you don't find your audience. So at the end, it doesn't really help you.
Yeah. But what's the point? Because the people who are going to love the book are not the ones that are reading it.
Yeah.
And my thing is, right, like there are a lot of people who like that kind of book. Like they seek out that like very edgy, very extreme. It's their thing. Like they're dark romance readers, or they're body horror readers, they're horror romance readers. Like they like that. It would be a way to sell it to people who are going to genuinely love it. Why? To me, that's a mismarketing opportunity.
I agree. Like I had read some of the 1-star reviews and the 2-star reviews. And obviously I read controversial books when I see something wacky going on in the comments. So I was prepared. But then at the end of the day, when I was done reading it, I was like, why would you just not be honest about the content of your book?
Yeah. Yeah. So Grumble makes a good point. They say, I don't fully agree with trigger warnings for everything, but they shouldn't be hidden either. So it's a really hard landscape to navigate, Grumble, because you've got a bunch of people who are like, I want to know ahead of time if there's going to be, these specific things that I really have a hard time processing, because I don't read things that are like that. So I need a trigger warning so I don't accidentally get exposed to a thing that I'm going to have a hard time processing. And then there are other people who are like, okay, but you could just put the book down though. Like when you see the book going in that direction, if you are that uncomfortable with it, just
yes, I think the only necessary trigger warnings are what you need to put in the book description to tell people what the book is about. But you need to be honest in what the book is about. The other technical trigger warning could be the type of writer that it is, because I'm thinking of Bret Easton Ellis, who is one of my favorite writers. American Psycho.
Okay. I read a lot of Clive Barker, so it's not like I have a problem with extreme content. Like,
and so like The Shards was his newest book that came out earlier this year, and it's part autobiography and then part not autobiography. But when you're reading Bret Easton Ellis, you know what you're getting into because it's American Psycho, so you know that you're going to get the gore. But the book is not about the gore, but just saying American Psycho, you're kind of prepared for that to be in the book, as opposed to if you mention a completely different genre and completely different author, the description should tell you specifically the inciting incidents. I think another example might be, his name was Augustin, because there's a lot of crazy stuff that happens in that book.
A lot, yeah.
But I don't expect a warning of anything that happens in that book. I just want you to tell me what the main plot of the book is going to be about.
Yeah,
and any of the other crazy, and any of the other crazy stuff that happens in the book just happens in the book.
Yeah.
So the only problem I had with Among the Hunted is that it was an inciting incident and it hid what part of that book was about.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see how that would feel intentionally misleading. And I can see how, as a reader, if that's blindsiding you and that's not what you were expecting. Because, like, the point of the blurb is to let people know what the book is about, so that they will either purchase it because they're interested in what the book's about, or they will not purchase it because they're not interested in what the book's about. Like, that's what the blurb is for. So, yeah, okay.
I mean, this not even having anything to do with trigger warnings. I get mad at blurbs when the plot of the blurb doesn't come in until halfway through the book.
Yeah.
Because, again, I feel lied to.
Yeah. All right. So the next one, the next TikTok I've got, oh gosh darn it. I have I've done this incorrect. I lost my thing. What is this? A BookTok drama. Yeah, that's her. All right.
Yeah, see, Grumble, I don't even read book blurbs most of the time because they are not very good.
Feel like this is not telling me what I need to know. All right. Here's this.
I made a video about this yesterday. Just yesterday, I told you guys to stop being creepy in the name of BookTok, and I just hear that people are harassing a minor, a 16-year-old biker boy. I'm actually horrified. Some of y'all went to the comment section saying, sorry, not until you're 18. You people are insane. Get a fucking grip. The boy wanted to show off his Maze Runner and Hunger Games books, and you're like, nope, this is not BookTok. Talking about some dark romance things to a minor boy? We do deserve the slander we get. What the hell is wrong with you people? Get a fucking grip.
That made a video. That little bit of self-awareness there, I think, is beautiful. We do deserve the slander we get. You know? Because here's the thing, right? Like, everybody knows. Everybody knows. If you go on BookTok, those women are feral. They don't know how to act. They don't understand boundaries. That if you are an attractive person who vaguely resembles one of the characters in their books, they're going to decide that you are their book boyfriend and ensue harassment whether you want it or not. Take it whether you want it or not. So, like the Seattle Kraken incident with the hockey players, they were reading these romance books that involved hockey as part of the theming, and somebody somewhere within their community decided that one of the hockey players on the Seattle Kraken, that's a hockey team, looked like this guy from the book. And they descended upon this man like he was a piece of meat and they were starving wolves. And his wife, so the team, the runners of the team leaned into it, changed all the branding, started tagging BookTok in all of their videos and all of their social media. They were intentionally baiting it. And then this man's wife said, hey, some of the stuff you guys are saying and doing towards my husband face to face is not appropriate. Could you please stop? And then they lost their minds. So the wife was basically saying, like, hey, this is making us really uncomfortable. It's not appropriate. Like, can you stop? And then they attacked her. They started calling her all kinds of terrible names.
She was even super kind to them. She was like, look, I agree with you guys. My husband is very attractive.
Yeah, he's smoking hot.
I am so lucky to have him, but y'all are making us a little uncomfortable. You're making him uncomfortable. Can you kind of chill out a little bit?
You're in my Instagram looking for pictures of him and commenting on our children.
And commenting on pictures with our children about how saucy my husband is. Can you not do that?
Can you not? Yeah. And so they got wild. And so he said they got vicious with her. And he came back and said, like, hey, can you stop, like, harassing my wife? Quit messing around with my wife. Like, leave her alone. What are you doing? And the Seattle Kraken, meanwhile, is, like, leaning full on into it. They're flying out the ringleader of this BookTok we'll call it a movement or a cult or something. But these ladies who were doing the whole, crack my back thing for the Seattle Kraken and all this, and they flew the ringleader out and like gave her a jersey, and on the back of it put BookTok. Like, they're full on encouraging this because they want the marketing. The more people watch the games, the more money they make. Mm-hmm. It's a business. They're there to make money.
And that's an entirely new demographic of book readers and women.
Yeah. It's the same phenomenon that's happening with Taylor Swift and the Chiefs. Like, they are leaning hard into that because it's money. More people watching, more dollars in their pocket, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah. And for some reason, when a media personality or a famous person puts up a boundary and says, yo, this is making me really uncomfortable, can you stop? It doesn't count because they're not a real person. They're just an image on your screen. Even though all this was happening in real life, like face to face at his games, like around his family. Yeah.
I don't know how much of that is just, I don't know if that is the screen or if that is just kind of what's sort of been normalized with the romance stuff, especially with the dark romance stuff, because a lot, not just in dark romance, because there's a lot of romance in general that's kind of dubious consent.
Yeah, I mean, it's
which is fine. It's its own thing. Yeah. But there is a point when if somebody says, hey, can you stop? You have to stop. It's not romantic to continue when someone says stop. And so, like, I'm not trying to put anything on either the non-con or the dub-con, because it's entirely its own thing.
Yeah.
But it feels like in some cases where there's actual interaction with people where hey, I have a boundary. Can you not? That's not being respected. And it's not just a screen. It's like with a lot of direct interaction.
Yeah.
I've had this happen with me too, even just in live streams where I've been like, hey, can you stop doing that to me? Stop saying that stuff to me. Yeah. And it just continues to get pushed until they're just, I have to remove them.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, you're making me uncomfortable should be all that needs to be said to make it stop.
Yeah.
Should be all that needs to be said to make it stop. And I'm sorry, I know that I keep bringing up the gender thing, and maybe I shouldn't because it's 2024. But I feel like if the person being targeted was a woman and was saying, hey, can you stop? This is making me uncomfortable. It would have been interpreted a lot differently. I feel like, when Billie Eilish is like, yo, can you stop zooming in on my tits every time you interview me? And then the guy goes, no. Like, we go after him rabidly, like the whole world turns around and is like, what do you mean no? She said stop, whereas because it's a dude and it's a jockey dude, he doesn't get to have boundaries. And that's not fair. It's just not fair. Like, either boundaries matter or they don't. And if they don't, we're in a lot of trouble.
That happens.
As a society.
That happens in a lot of fiction too, where that guy over there has everything perfect.
Real.
It's not real. No.
It's not supposed to be real.
It goes back to go and touch grass.
People who don't respect boundaries in real life go to jail, as they should. Like, it's, if you're walking down the street and some guy walks by and touches you and you say stop and he doesn't stop, he goes to jail, as he should. It doesn't matter that the gender roles are reversed. Yeah.
Unless you're me at my old job, that was a problem.
Okay.
I worked at a liquor store for a little while. And I worked the night shift, and there was somebody that wandered in, and he was half drunk. Yeah. And so he was making inappropriate comments, and I was doing the cashier thing until it came into saying I was going to be assaulted when I left to go to my car that night. And so I said something back. And then when I came back from my 3 days off, I was fired for inappropriately talking to a customer.
I'd have called the police. Yeah, I would have called the police. Or your manager at like 2:00 in the morning and be like, yo, I need you to come in and walk me to my car. Either that or I'm calling the cops.
But so, sometimes stuff just happens.
Yeah.
No means no. No means no.
Right. Like hindsight, I can be like, oh, I would have done this. Oh, I would have done that. And nobody knows what they're going to do until they're in that moment, in that situation with you never really know. Everybody's like, oh, I would be a badass. I would be blah, blah, blah. I would say this, I would do that. And it's like, okay, yeah, but would you though? You don't know until you're there. You always think I'm going to stand up for myself. And then it turns out maybe you really don't. Maybe you really are just trying to be nice. Maybe you are just trying to not be over the top. Maybe you are just trying not to get fired and lose your job because you need it to put a roof over your head and clothes on your back and food in your damn mouth.
Yep.
So maybe you wouldn't be the badass to do the sassy thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's so much more that goes into this stuff. And when you're in a situation where you feel like you're all powerful, kind of going to the girls on the sidelines where they can just yell whatever they want because those guys can't react.
They can't do anything.
They're in this stadium and they're representing the company. And if they do anything, this girl's got a camera in her hand. If they do or say anything, it is broadcast to all these people that their business just paid for them to be here.
Yeah.
And so they're arrested people.
Yeah, John, I hear what you're saying here. John's saying that we live in a day where people can say you're making me uncomfortable just to control you. I hear what you're saying. I'm not saying that doesn't exist. What I'm saying is for your own protection, take them at their word. Assume when they say I'm uncomfortable that they are and leave them alone.
Yep. Especially if you're the one that can walk away. If somebody is at a booth and they're selling their books and they're saying, hey, I'm uncomfortable. Just say, okay, sorry about that. Have a good day and walk away.
Yep. Bye. See ya. Or not. Yeah. For your own protection, take them at their word. Believe them.
You're not going to get anything out of it if they're already saying that you're uncomfortable. Like you're not going to go any better than that.
No good can come out of that interaction at that point. Even if they're being just disingenuous, John, you're not going to get any good out of that interaction if it carries on.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's go for the next one. She looks upset.
BookTok has done it yet again. I am the part of BookTok that makes the thirst edits for Harassment and Sleep Token and via Romance and Stalk, covering all my bases. Here's what I don't fucking do. Harass married people with boundaries, and most of all, minors. 16-year-old biker kid that you're in his comments leaving thirsty fucking messages in his DMs trying to get him or you to be his backpack. Fucking weird. Gross. Half of you have kids that are older than him. In his bio, over fictional people. Learn to separate your books from real life. Leave the fucking children out of it. Stop giving a bad name to people on BookTok. BookTok.
So I feel like she made an interesting point about being able to separate your books from real life. Mm-hmm. and being able to recognize that this real life man standing in front of you is not the character in the book that you were just reading and flicking your bean to last night. Like that's not the same person, and maybe you shouldn't treat him like he's actively participating in this romance you have going on in your head.
What do you think is causing that?
Lack of face-to-face socialization between adult human beings. I think it's a lack of appropriate socialization between peers, face to face. I think we as a society, particularly in the Western world, do not have enough face to face human interaction with other people, and that it causes our perception of what is real and what is not, and what is appropriate and what is not, to become skewed. And the longer you go, you find this a lot with people who spend a lot of time online and not a lot of time face to face with other people. Mm-hmm. The longer you go without that real human interaction with other adults, specifically other adults in your peer group, the more skewed reality becomes for you, and the more out of touch with reality you become.
I think I've seen stuff like that, even if we're not talking about just even this inappropriateness of what would be considered inappropriate business relationships.
Yeah.
Where technically maybe you hired that person, but because you're constantly online, your job is online, then you don't really think about how you're trash talking them later because you don't have that business relationship anymore.
Yeah.
But in any field, it would not be appropriate to talk about an ex-employee like that.
Correct. Yeah. But it's happening online, so it's not real.
So it doesn't look the same. Yeah.
No.
But it's that lack of understanding what reality looks like versus online.
Yeah. It's the lack of ability to recognize and discrete delineations between types of human interaction. Yeah.
Yep. I feel like I've experienced this I had somebody comment on a video, I think it was one of my book reviews, that said, good job ruining your career by commenting on, like, making a book review about a book I didn't like. But I'm like, my guy, I have a job that I leave my house for. Yeah. What career are you talking about?
Yeah. I don't know how much you think I'm making doing this, but
I socialize every day. I don't know what career you think I have.
Yeah. Yeah.
There were two things that I wrote down while she was talking. One, I don't know what a sleep token is.
I don't either, but
I was wondering.
I do know when they were talking, I think it was the extended version of World's video where they were talking about somnophilia. I know that is sex while the other person is sleeping. Like it's getting sex while the person's sleeping. So I'm wondering if it has something to do with that, like a branch of somnophilia or something like that. That's just a guess, by the way. I don't know. And
then the other thing was, she said DMing this child. You should, as an adult,
you
never enter a child's DMs.
Yeah, the comments
for
were
your
not
own protection. Even if you're just doing it innocently, never go into a child's DMs,
because you don't know how that's going to be interpreted in hindsight.
Yeah.
But yeah, the comments that were being made towards this young man who was 16 on Booktok were not just public comments. Some of them were private comments. Yeah. And I'm not sure how that got discovered. There were screenshots of some of them on X, formerly Twitter, and why the name got changed, I don't know, but I'm not going into that. Twitter is so much more marketable. I just like, what are you doing? But yeah, so there were screenshots of some of the comments. And the only way I can imagine that happened is either he was talking to somebody else about it and sent screenshots to them and they leaked, or the people that were sending them told on themselves.
Yep. Or it could have been anybody even within the community that said they DM'd it, or they were showing their friends, because it could have been even just in the group, since they were all hyping each other up, and they could have
thinking
showed
that it
friend,
was okay.
And then,
oh, look what I did.
Then stuff started hitting the fan, and then who knows what was going on.
Yeah. So I don't know where they came from, but that's definitely been part of it. Yeah. All right, I've got another one. Oh God, that's not a good place to pause.
Hey, dark romance girlies.
There she is.
You're making us look bad. Apparently there's some 16-year-old that's in a mask, maybe a biker helmet, and y'all are sexualizing him and giving him dark romance recommendations. Very spicy, smutty, inappropriate recommendations. As dark romance girlies, we're always like, oh, it's fiction, it's not real life. And I agree. But right now you're blurring the lines. That is a minor, a whole child. And he's real. I haven't seen his page. I don't want to know what his page is. I have no business being on his page. But I have seen other creators talk about it, and I have seen screenshots of some of the things y'all are posting, commenting on this minor's page for him to read with your whole chest. So let's not do that, okay? I know we tend to get excited when we find a man on here that's into BookTok, because we want to get along with men.
Yeah, but it's not a man.
Other men that enjoy it like we do. But let's rein it in, okay? We don't need 16-year-olds, and we don't have to sexualize every man that comes across Booktok. Sometimes things can just be for the girls. I personally don't really want real men to know that I read books about other men chopping the hands off of a man who touched his girl inappropriately, because I don't want that in real life. It stays here in fantasy. So if you come across a minor's page, even if you don't think your comment is inappropriate, maybe just don't leave a comment, because what may seem innocent to you might not seem so innocent to that boy's mother.
Yeah. So somebody else, a different creator who we'll watch here in a sec, made a comment about that she doesn't even know if his mother knows what's happening, or if she even knows if he's on TikTok. And I think that's an important thing to note, because a lot of people will be like, oh, well, it's up to their parents to make sure that they're not exposed to things that are harmful to them. And I'm sitting here going, well, I know what I was doing at 16, and I don't know how you grew up, but my parents didn't know what the heck I was up to.
They couldn't all the time.
No.
I had situations where I was even on kids' websites where kids just play video games. And
I'm not even talking about online. I'm talking about when I was out roaming around with my friends and the shenanigans I would get up to. I'm old as balls, Ian. You know,
I get it. Well, see, I was homeschooled, so the only people I knew were my siblings.
Right. So I was I was out of control when I was a teenager. Like, I was wild as hell. I was out drinking. I was doing drugs. I was having relations with young men, not all of whom were age appropriate, mind you. My parents had no idea. They had no idea. I'm 41. They still don't know some of the shit I get up to, because I'd be embarrassed for them to find out. And at this point, you know, I thought I was so cool that I had this whole secret life that they didn't even know about. And like, that's a thing, you know, like everybody's like, oh, well, it's up to the parents to protect the children. It's like, how are you going to do that? My parents, 25 years ago, my parents couldn't even protect me from walking out the front door and the shit that was happening in the world. How are they supposed to know what's going on online?
Yep. There's no way for parents to stop everything from happening to you unless they literally stand over you and give you no freedom whatsoever.
Which isn't healthy.
And that's not going to happen either.
Yeah, I mean, they've got jobs. They have lives of their own, hopefully. You know, hopefully they're not trying to live through you, but like, how are they supposed to protect you?
And see, even as me, who is fairly mild, like the only bad things I did as a child were I didn't let my dad bully me because I defied him every time he tried to tell me what to do.
Yeah.
But like, so I was homeschooled. So everything that I did was either in my house or with a parent, because they had to take me to like the rock club because I was a dork. Or it was in the neighborhood where I would just walk up to the school to play on the play set.
You said rock club. You meant like geology, not like rock and roll.
Yes, like rock.
I knew it. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
We had a little thing that we put up at the fairgrounds too, that we did a little rock display. Actually, my sister and I usually did seashells and all things related to the ocean. But
okay, cool.
But so like
we lived very different lives.
But see, like I was very generally quiet, and then all of my homework was on the computer because we had a program called. It was, oh my gosh, something schoolhouse. I can't remember. It doesn't really matter. But it was all on the computer. And so then once that was done, I would sometimes play games like on shockwave.com where they just had kids games, or I would play Age of Empires on the Zone.
Yeah.
Now, Shockwave was all entirely kids games. I would often play Inklink, which is a Pictionary style game. You could still do DMs in there, and I would get DM'd by older people. And you know what they constantly asked? First, it was age, sex, location.
ASL. Yep.
And then, even when you said that you were 12, they would ask you
they don't care.
To do sexual things. It doesn't matter. And guess what? So my mom, even if I was using the computer, she would come back every 30 minutes, every 15, 30 minutes to make sure, you know, I was fine and I wasn't doing anything inappropriate. Number one, if I closed the screen too quickly, she'd be like, you're hiding something. Get off the computer. Yeah. So then that, obviously even that. But I would still have these inappropriate messages sent to me as a child. And I never talked about that stuff with my mother. She probably still doesn't know that there were predators. And I didn't know at that time because I was a child. And I was just playing this kids game because kids don't know.
Yeah. We had a Prodigy when I was young, and I'm dating myself here. So the rest of the folks in the comments who are my age, you'll remember Prodigy. Back in the AOL days. And it was a chat program, a bulletin board chat program set up specifically for children. And a large portion of the people using Prodigy were not children. And we thought, and I'm not the only one, because, you know, you go to school with other kids and you talk about it when you get to school. And we thought we were so cool that this older guy was interested in us. And we thought that that was so special because we were so dumb and did not know any better. We did not know that we needed to guard ourselves and protect ourselves because we didn't recognize the danger. That's not changed. There's still, I mean,
and you can live in the most protected bubble ever, and you're still going to have things that your parents do not know about.
Absolutely.
And you're going to I bet this kid on a Booktok thinks that it's the coolest thing that he's got all of this attention.
Well, I mean, you saw, he's like, oh, they're just making jokes. It's like, he doesn't understand that it's, even if they are making jokes, and not all of them were jokes, it's not appropriate for them to be making those jokes with you. And he can't see the danger. He's too young.
And us, you know, as old people can look back to when we were that age or younger and not seeing the danger.
All right, I've got one more, I think.
There's something that happened recently that we need to talk about. You may have seen the stitches, you may have seen the people talking about it or the original video, but Booktok descended on a 16-year-old boy and basically sexualized him for riding a motorcycle. It's gross to do that to anyone without their consent, but a minor, like, we shouldn't have to have this conversation. We know what it's like to be sexualized without our consent. So why are we doing it to other people? Like, the hypocrisy in that is mind-blowing. And we should know better. As grown women doing this to a 16-year-old, it is beyond gross. It's tough.
Just to be clear, it would be gross even if he wasn't 16. Like, descending on someone unsuspecting who you know does not realize that they've sprung a trap on themselves, which is what that was. It wouldn't matter that they were 16. Like, that's just making it worse than it already was. It was already not okay to begin with, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, because imagine like if it was a 21-year-old woman who said that she likes riding because she's talking about horses. Yeah. And then a bunch of men jumped on her to make a bunch of jokes about riding because she's a pro rider. Yeah. No, it would not be any more acceptable because she was an adult.
Yeah, so it's still sexual harassment, even if they're an adult. It's compounded by the fact that it's a minor. Just wanted to be clear about that.
It's toxic. It really is. And almost all of society recognizes that we do not sexualize people because they're not objects. They're not book boyfriends. They are not
that term.
Walking tropes. They are real people with real feelings. And when you sexualize someone, it damages them. We know that. So why would we do it to others? Why do we think it's appropriate to do it to others? And let's just talk for a sec about the effect that experience has on that boy. He's young. He's growing into himself. He's learning what he likes and what he likes. He's still in high school. He's a child. And there are a lot. Almost everyone has a story or multiple stories about something they experienced or something that they read that harmed them or that they were not ready for because of their age. And
I feel like, how do I put this? I feel like there's a lot of people who are basically justifying, or at least attempted to at first. A lot of them have backed off now. But they started by attempting to justify their behavior with, oh, I read sexy books when I was his age. I was doing X and Y and Z when I was his age. Like, that makes it okay. Because I don't think they recognize that damage that was done to them at that age is part of why they don't understand appropriate boundaries now.
Yep. That's one of the things that they talk about with exposure to sexual material if you're too young, or one of the examples of child sexual abuse is that you get rid of that child's boundaries and they stop understanding what is and is not appropriate. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, well, I read smutty books when I was 16. It's like, okay, but like, maybe you shouldn't have, or maybe you should at least take a look at what that means and what that's done and why you think it's okay to act the way you're acting now, and how that ties back to the fact that maybe you were over sexualized at too young of an age, and that's why you're having a hard time processing appropriate boundaries now and accepting other people's boundaries, you know.
Which is really what it should come down to. If somebody says, one, no, stop. There should not be any of these questions of, oh, but they actually really like it. or but they'll learn to like it. And in general, they should also look at a 16-year-old and not be thinking sexy thoughts.
Well, so I feel like the no stop and the he's 16 are two separate things. The Seattle Kraken thing where he's literally saying, please stop, and they don't care. And then they just do it more because they think it's funny that he said stop and that they keep going. That's one thing.
Yeah, it is.
He's 16 and he says it's okay. It's like, ma'am, he doesn't get to say that it's okay. He just doesn't. I'm sorry, he doesn't. He's a child. He's a minor. He cannot recognize what is okay and what is not. You're the adult. You're supposed to do it for him. You know? Right.
They are separate.
That's
why
we have age of consent is because even if they say it's okay, they don't have the mental and emotional maturity to recognize that it's not really okay. Even if they say it's okay, it's not. You know?
He most likely only wanted to share his love of motorcycles. And what happened is he got hurt. And how sad is that it came from
I don't know that he did. She said he got hurt, but I don't know that he did. Or at least not in a way that will or is manifesting itself just now. Is this particular experience with Booktok going to traumatize this kid? I don't know. I don't know. I think if at 16 he jumps from Maze Runner and the Hunger Games to Haunting Adeline, it will. So I feel like the intent was to traumatize him, even if it wasn't a conscious intent. The intent was to traumatize him. You know, whether or not they've been successful in it, God, I hope not. You know, I hope he really does genuinely just think, you know, oh, these women were making jokes, and then later comes back and recognizes, like once he gets a little older, recognizes like, oh, they probably shouldn't have been making those jokes. Maybe they shouldn't have been making those jokes. You know what I mean? The problem is, I don't think hurt is the right word. I think he has been modeled inappropriate interactions between an adult and a child is a better way to say it. You know what I mean?
I think hurt is a simplified version because I think that this event is going to affect him in the future. Yes. Do I know if it's going to be traumatic or not? No. Do I think that it's going to affect the way that he responds to either group scenarios or women? It's possible. Because I can look at some of my situations where I was a dumb teenager and didn't understand some of the online situations that I had, and then how it has affected me over time in the way that I interact with others and the way that I view my own body. But it didn't manifest when I was 13 or 14.
It doesn't.
It manifests over time. So was he hurt? We won't know. But
there's no way to tell.
But will this affect his interactions with himself and with others? Very likely. And he can still easily be affected and have coping mechanisms or just deal with it just fine. But even if he goes through it just fine, it has still had an effect on his character.
Just because you learn how to cope with something does not mean the damage was not done.
Yeah.
All right. Let's
built around safety, and it's sad. And as a mother of boys, I think about that mom's experience, whether or not she knows what happened. She's right to be extremely angry. And it wasn't just one person, it was an entire community.
I don't think that's really fair. I feel like a lot of people, I feel like the first few reactions were inappropriate, and then people clocked it and were like, yo, knock it off. We don't do that. You know, I feel like to say it was an entire community is disingenuous. And I know she's upset when she's recording this. So let's cut her a little slack. I don't think she's intentionally blowing it out of the water. I think she's upset, and it's causing it to feel a lot bigger than maybe it was. That doesn't mean it's not a big deal, but I think to say it was an entire community and they were just okay with that, I don't think that that's fair.
I would put in the assessment of this specifically is that it may not be the entire community, but people from the outside may label it as it was everybody that did this.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely the thing that's happening.
So that's more how I would take from it, is because like mom's hearing about this happening to a child is going to be like, all of Booktok did this to my child.
Yeah.
Even if you've got, 80% that said, hey, you guys need to knock it off.
Yeah.
The outsiders are still going to see it as the group.
Yeah.
Which I think it inspires more of the reason why many of the others are like, look, maybe it's time I'm done with Booktok because I don't want to be associated with you people.
I don't want to be associated with a bunch of child predators. You've tainted the water now. You've sullied it. Yeah.
We can't do that. We need to do better. And shame on you if you were one of those people. Shame on you for thinking that was okay. Because you have now participated in the harassment and harming of a child who did not deserve that. He will carry this.
So do you think, when she's saying shame on you for thinking that was okay, do you think that at least some of the people who made those inappropriate comments and then went back and deleted them, do you think that they, and obviously we're attributing motives to people we don't know. Mm-hmm. So this is more just a thought experiment, not actually accusing anyone of anything. Do you think that they learned from that experience and recognized like, oh yeah, I fucked up. That's really fucked up. I shouldn't do that. I'm going to be more careful. Or do you think it was a covering my own ass sort of thing?
I think it's a mixture.
Well, yeah, but like, because I'm really hopeful that they're looking at this and going, oh yeah, I've gotten completely out of control. Let me reel myself back in a little bit. And as much as I hope for that, I also know in the back of my mind that that's certainly not all the cases.
Yeah. Well, I think some of the, like, I can't say, yes, it's more one way or the other, because you have to have an open mind to being wrong. Yeah. And I think when some people are in a mob, or it also depends on the friends that they keep. If there were like 5 or 6 of them that all sent him DMs and they were like, oh shoot, this blew up.
Yeah.
They're not going to feel bad. They don't want to be caught because they're just having fun with their book boyfriends on TikTok.
Yeah.
And so some will just look for the next target, and then others will be like, oh crap, I didn't notice. But that is kind of a come to Jesus moment. And you have to be open to it in order to be like, oh shoot, I let this get out of hand.
Yeah. I think some of them genuinely were so caught up in the habit of just making thirsty comments on every biker BookTok crossover they saw and didn't notice at first he was 16. I do think that genuinely happened to a few people. Mm-hmm. I also think there were at least a few who made comments that were out of line or inappropriate and then got called out on it. And it kind of pulled them up by the reins a little bit and said, oh crap, I've gotten out of hand. This is out of control. I'm out of control. Let me reverse. Let me hit reverse.
But it just makes me wonder is how many are going to relapse when the next trope comes along? Because what this kind of feels like, because it could have been how many of them came from the crack my back thing? How many participated in that? So how many is this? It's the bikers now and they're like, oh crap, that went too far. But then like comes the next trend and they jump on the next person.
The thing is, like a lot of the bikers are leaning way into it. They're into it. Mm-hmm. They like it. They, they add TikToks of themselves going to the bookstores and reading Haunting Adeline, and they make tantalizing or titillating comments on the, on the screen in their TikTok. You know what? Those guys want to play the game with you.
Yeah.
They want to play with you. Go play with them. Like you go play in that sandbox. And maybe let the other people who are not engaging with the app in that way and are participating in other communities and dipping their toes into BookTok itself, which, oh, by the way, is not all dark romance. There's a lot of people talking about a lot of books that are not just fairy smut and cutting people's hands off, because apparently that's getting us all hot and bothered this week. Speaking of, if that's like your thing, I am not knocking your preferences. I like all kinds of crazy things. You like what you like. What I'm saying is maybe let's not try to drag people into our own bloody fantasies if they're not voluntarily opening the door and inviting us.
Yep, there are two different things. And I'm not trying to imply that everybody that is participating in this is any sort of problem. There are the two consents that you need to double check as you're doing this. One, double check that they are playing back with you, and that the people that you are interacting with can tell you no at any time that they become uncomfortable, just as you can tell anybody else that you are uncomfortable with their responses. Yeah. So that's number one, check. Number two, make sure they are appropriate to respond to. So even if this kid was doing this, your responses to him, if anything, should have been age appropriate. Do a teen book maybe that you think are comparable to what he was sharing.
We haven't talked about that, but there were a lot of very age appropriate book recommendations by people who thought it through, and there were a lot of age appropriate book recommendations for him as well.
So this whole thing is the people that cannot see that where they're blurring the lines, and that's going to hit
there's
everybody.
There's over 5,000 comments on the video. There's plenty of perfectly appropriate responses.
Yeah. So the people that are the ones that are the problem need to touch grass and recognize consent. Yeah.
Or, that maybe this person online is not though they may look like it, they're not the person in the book that you just read. You know? And unless they're intentionally engaging with you or with the community or with the platform in that way, maybe we don't assume that that's what they're looking for just because they happen to be dressed in a certain way, styling their hair in a certain way, wearing a helmet and riding a motorcycle. Like, that doesn't necessarily mean that they want to read your smut or be exposed to your hypersexualized comments. And I think that it's okay for people to say, yo, that makes me uncomfortable. You should go do that somewhere else at any time. But if catcalling is wrong, if I'm walking down the street and some dude whistles at me and tells me, I bet you'd look great riding my mustache, that's not appropriate. It's no more appropriate if it's reversed and I'm doing the same thing to him online. That's not appropriate anywhere to anyone for any reason. It's just not, Oh, here we go. I've lost my mouse.
Oh, no.
So Spooky says, there are kink communities that would be happy to assist adults who are curious. Go forth, explore, leave the kids alone. I agree wholeheartedly, Spooky. I agree wholeheartedly. There is all sorts of educational adult content out there for every flavor of fetish that you could possibly have. There are people in the world that are into that thing and will enthusiastically engage with you on those terms. You don't need to go poke at, stalk, harass, terrorize random people online because they happen to fit a certain aesthetic that you've been fantasizing about. That is weird, stalkery, borderline serial killer planning their next move kind of shit. Can we not? Just don't. Just don't.
And also do not do that if you see somebody that deliberately says, I am not interested in that thing. Do not try to then sneak them that thing.
Or try to convince them why they're wrong. If somebody's like, hey, yo, I'm not into that, just believe them. Just take them at their word. It's okay for them to know what they like better than you know what they like. They're probably the authority on that subject, you know?
The only exception to that is if you are really good friends with somebody and you know that you can joke back and forth on something.
Right. Yes.
But that's because you know each other. But if
we're talking random strangers on the internet here. We're not talking like you and your buddy, joshing around or whatever.
Yeah. It's like the people that I've seen that see clean fiction or Christian fiction and they go, I want to write smut, and then put it in that genre to expose those people specifically. And no, just go over there and share it with the people that are looking for what you make. You don't got to go looking for the people that are looking for something else.
Yeah.
You wouldn't take a sci-fi book and shove it in a different genre for people that are specifically looking at historical fiction.
So here's my thing specifically about the clean fiction, intentionally inserting erotic or sexual content into books that are labeled clean fiction with the intention of exposure or exposure therapy, exposing people who didn't sign up for it to sexual content. How much of that is motivated by the fact that pornography is addictive? It is demonstrably proven medically, scientifically. There's no refuting it. Pornography is addictive. We all know it is. How much of that is, I am so hooked on this, I cannot see the world through any lens other than this filter, and I cannot abide the fact that you have not gotten hooked the way that I have. I can't stand that you are not down here wallowing with me.
I don't know how much of that there is, but I feel like there is a section of that.
Because that feels spiteful to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've seen it in a lot of the conversation where, like, obviously I can say, hey, most of the time I prefer fade to black or no smut in what I read. I've read smut. I will read stuff again if it shows up in the story. Bret Easton Ellis has the saying that basically, if you're going to write sex, then write it as disgusting and as realistic as possible.
Yeah.
And so he does lots of details.
It's a mess. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, you got the awkward threesome in Glamorama where you've got armpits going in people's faces because navigating multiple people is awkward.
It's awkward. It's awkward. It is. In case you were curious and you're fantasizing about it, it's awkward as shit.
It's not like they write it in the books where it's glamorized.
It's not like it's in porn. That's what the edits are for. They cut out all the awkward parts where, like, your legs bending backwards and you've got to, like, twist because your hip's getting sore or whatever. Like, they edit all that out. It's fine.
But see, so, like, I can read the detailed stuff and I can still say I prefer the not detailed stuff. That's not against anybody that prefers the detailed stuff. But why is it when somebody says, hey, I prefer the non-detailed stuff or the fade to black or not at all, there's always this pushback that says something is wrong with you if that's not what you want, or there's the spiteful, well, I'm going to get you to read it.
Yeah. Yeah, that it feels spiteful to me. So we were talking earlier before the stream that I have just finished going through basically my last round of edits on a werewolf romance that I've written. And conceptually, my original plan was to write it clean with fade to black and then have an alternative copy with, like, 4 little chilies on the front with all the sex scenes put in. To write it without the sex scenes as a full, complete, solid book with fade to black. And then if you wanted the more illicit copy, you could buy the other copy. Now, what do you think about that sort of marketing where, like, it could go either way? Like, you can intentionally buy the version that's fade to black, or you can intentionally buy the version that's a little more illicit, and that's what you're into, and that's great, you know? So the people who want it can find it, and the people who don't. And we can still all talk about the same book because we're reading the same story with the same characters. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's a business move. That's what you're going to get. I saw something on Amazon the other day that was like, there was the hetero version and then the not hetero version. So it's just the same thing, but as that. So you're just appealing to different groups. But then I think that's also what it comes down to, because the people that are reading it for the smut are going to read it for the smut, not the story.
Agreed.
So, like, you're going to have 2 separate groups of people that are talking about the book, even if they're reading the same book, because the smut readers are more likely to talk about the smut, while the story readers are more likely to talk about the story. Yeah.
So I have a friend of mine, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, when I first, like, sat down and got serious and was like, okay, I'm going to sit here and write a novel, before I wrote the first one. And he said, my wife and I just finished reading 50 Shades of Grey together. And I said, oh, because it kind of surprised me. And he goes, yeah, we discovered by the end of it, we'd read 2 different books. I'm like, what do you mean? And he said, well, I discovered that my wife skipped over from erotic scene to erotic scene, and those were the parts that she read, and everything else she just sort of, like, speed read or skimmed or whatever. She was basically bouncing between the erotic scenes, whereas I did it the opposite way around. And they both realized that neither one of them had gotten a full story because both parts were necessary to understand everything that was going on. And his impression of the characters in the story and why things happened and what happened was completely different than hers, because he was only reading the storyline. And then when things would start heating up, he'd skip forward a few pages until it got back to where everybody had the clothes back on, which is interesting to me.
Yeah, so I think ultimately what you're just going to have is two separate readerships, as if they're reading two separate books anyway. Because in observing this conversation, I've seen people that disregard the entirety of the book because they just go, like you said, from sex scene to sex scene, and that's all they care about. And they'll give a book a 4-star regardless of the characters or plot if the sex scenes are written a certain way.
If they're titillating,
yeah. And so then I think you're going to have the book readers that are going to be even as if you were writing a historical romance versus a futuristic time jumping sci-fi. It's just going to be two completely different readerships in the same way as you currently have, because you're doing the romance and then you have your other project that's your more passion project. And so those are going to be two completely different readerships. Even if it's the same book. So that's all that I think it really comes down to, is they're just different people.
My thing is, like, I quite like clean romance. Like, I don't mind the like hardcore, like crazy, like the concept of somebody cutting somebody's hands off because they touched their property being a person, doesn't faze me a bit. Like I would read that book. It wouldn't bother me. But I also know that for my own tastes, like I'm not bothered by that, but for my own tastes, I prefer Fade to Black. I don't know why I do. I just know that I do. I find a lot of the time, if I'm reading a book and things are getting really steamy, that I will kind of like flip forward a little bit and see like, okay, well, how long is this going to go on? And how many times do I really need to read? He thrusts, she moans, like, I don't care. Let's move on. You know, like I'd rather have sex than read about it. And I wonder, and I'm trying to be kind, but I do wonder how much of the folks who are struggling with not being able to enjoy a book unless it has a whole lot of really intense sex or really explicit sex, and not being able to allow others to appreciate books that don't have a lot of sex, I wonder if the reason that they're struggling with that is because they're not getting what they need physically. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to like, I'm not, it's not an accusation. I'm not trying to be judgy, but I do wonder, like, is that a manifestation of loneliness and the need for human contact? Or is it something else that I just can't understand or identify because I don't feel it? You know,
well, I couldn't say either way for that, because there are different ways. That could just be they're manifesting it in this way because they don't go outside and talk to other people. And it might not be a sexual thing. Because celibacy doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have repressed sexuality.
No, absolutely
so
not.
That too. Yeah,
no,
I'm just
not.
trying to bring that, so it's not like an accusation of that either.
No,
but
not
there is something
it's
weird.
Concern more than anything else.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring that in as a thing to make it not that too. But that makes me think of Brandon Sanderson came up before when I was investigating this for one of my previous videos. And I saw a forum that said that there was no sex in Brandon Sanderson's books because of his religion, so he chooses. Mormon. But then I listened to other people who had read Brandon Sanderson's books, and they've said, well, there are romance scenes. They just fade to black because there are couples.
There's romance,
But then if you look at the comments, when they are actually saying there's no sex, they mean there's no graphic sex.
Correct. There's no explicit sexual details.
But see, then as me who hasn't read these books is seeing the conversation say there's no sex in them. What's wrong with Brandon Sanderson? Because sex is a part of life, which implies that there's none in there whatsoever. But
but that's not
other people, that say that there are. So then me as somebody not involved in this book just see two different people talking about completely different situations, and this implication that there's only sex in a book if it's explicit on the page.
Right. But that's not accurate.
That's not.
I have not read. I have a whole bunch of Brandon Sanderson books on my shelf waiting to be read. I have not read them yet, but I am aware that his faith, I believe, is what drives that there is no explicit sexual content on the page. However, they are adult books with adult characters and adult themes written for adults by an adult. Their characters have romances, they have successes and failures, they lose loves, they gain new ones, just like anyone else. He just doesn't go in and say tab A into slot B sort of stuff.
Yep. So then that makes me wonder, what is it that is driving this thing where it's not even just the implication that it exists, but some need it in the book or it doesn't count.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that community is the overlap with the the folks who were in that kid's comments saying, oh, Hunger Games and Maze Runner, that's not BookTok. BookTok is Haunting Adeline. And that's just not true.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not true. I'm sorry, it's not. Like, that may be the part of BookTok that you interact with because you've clicked on those videos, you've watched those videos, and algorithmically that's what it feeds you, because that's what internet algorithms do. They give you more of what you interact with because that's how they make money, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But just because that's all you see on your For You page, because that's the way that you've trained the algorithm, doesn't mean that that's all there is.
Yep. That reads to my specific Pinterest page, because I'm learning to draw right now. And so what I save is a bunch of forms so that I can just have an idea of poses to draw.
Mine too.
That's all that's on Pinterest. That's just what Pinterest is sending me, because that's what
what you've touched. Yeah.
Yeah.
You've stayed on those images longer. You've clicked on them. You've saved them. And so it gives you more of what you asked for.
Yep.
Every time you click, every time you watch a video or a short or anything like that, you are asking for more of that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, which is how people wind up going down these tunnels, and they get so lost because they, you know,
this is all that exists.
Everybody feels this way. No, they don't. No, they don't. You know, we're not all sex crazed, thirsty people who cannot interact with another human being without there being an intense sexual undercurrent. Like, you can learn to have interactions with other humans that are not sexually charged. You can have friendships that are not, oh, but if. No, not but if. We're just friends, and that's okay. Like, you can have interactions with other people that are not based on sex. You just can.
Can you really?
Well, you can learn to. That's what I'm saying. I think there are people who really struggle with that. I think there are people who really struggle with that. And I think that learning how to interact with other people in a variety of ways is a learned skill.
Mm-hmm.
And either they've never learned it or they've forgotten it due to lack of exercising it, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's kind of a, you know, you got to sit there and think of like, okay, well, how do you fix that? You can't. They have to do it themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't know how to pose this, because it kind of goes into you talking about having two separate versions of your book, which are actually going to be two separate audiences. Mm-hmm. But this is something that I've run into, and I kind of just want your thoughts in general on how it exists, because I don't know how to place it as a question.
Mm-hmm.
But in looking at a bunch of the YA books and the smut books recently, I've run into a couple of different authors that under the same pin name write YA and smut. And so if you know how people purchase out the backlogs of books.
Yeah.
For me, when I'm looking at that and stuff, I think one of them, she wrote an entire backlog as a backlog of smut. And then she got on the fairy train and has written the new adult, young adult, fae stuff. And so for me, that looks like a pipeline of getting one audience for the YA and then moving them over to the smut. But
do you think that's consciously trying to pull one audience into the other, or do you think that that's an author trying to capitalize on their existing name recognition, not having to start all over, because we all know that that's really hard, and maybe just not understanding the knock-on effects of doing that?
See, I don't know, because I'm not sure what the question entirely is that I'm trying to say, but I've seen this observation. And so then in listening to you talk about your werewolf story, where you've got the separate version of the clean and the separate version of the heat, that's two separate audiences, and it's very distinct just because the content is going to be very different.
The covers would be different, and it would be very clearly labeled, by the way. That's the intention. I don't know if I'm going to do it or not, but if I do, it will intentionally say spicy version and have peppers on the front, so you know that that's what you're getting.
Yeah, and I think it's a smart business move, because you're appealing to two very different audiences.
Yeah.
And it's very clear that it's two very different audiences. But when I'm looking at a book or an author that has smut, and then they're also doing YA fairy stuff that has some of the same tropes that are very popular in the current smut stuff, but it's sold as a YA.
Yeah.
That doesn't feel like two separate audiences. It feels like it's going to catch both the adults that already like this author because of the smut, but it's also going to catch the youth that don't know of this author through that YA, and then they're going to want to read more of that author, which will lead them to the smut.
Yeah. Yeah, but I don't know how. I always try to give people the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not saying that I'm
Yeah.
not saying that they're doing it maliciously. I'm just saying it's an observation that I see, and I mostly don't think that they're really thinking through what they're doing. I think it's kind of like the TikTok thing where you're not really thinking of who is perceiving your stuff.
Yeah.
But usually in the past, there's at least been some kind of recognition that if you're going to write middle grade, if you're writing adult books, you're going to put it in a different pen name. Yeah.
Different pen name.
But I do think that it has more to do like with what you're saying, where you don't want to start over with a new name.
Well, yeah. I mean, I can see why someone would make that decision, because I made that decision myself to my own detriment. Because remember, I told you this channel used to be video games, video game reviews and streams and stuff like that. And I chose to keep the channel so that I could retain the subscription count, thinking that I was being clever, and shot myself in the foot. Because the audience was not the same. The overlap wasn't the same. So what I thought was, I will capitalize on the work I have already done so that I don't have to do it again, was really, I have made this already uphill climb that much steeper for myself, because I am not only having to find the audience for the book information, I'm having to retrain YouTube's algorithm that this is no longer the content I'm producing and this audience is no longer valid. Go find these people instead, because it's still trying to serve these videos to those people over there who don't care. So I think that is, in large part, if that's what's caused it, I don't want to start over. I want to capitalize on my existing name recognition. I think that is somebody making the same naive mistake that I made.
And then that goes into Lightlark, which would have been a middle grade if not for the smut.
Yeah, I ran into that a lot. I felt the same way about the Cyborg Tinker. That felt very young adulty, very like late middle grade, early young adult, or maybe mid young adult. I'm pushing young adult all the way up to like 22-ish, and kind of including new adult there. But that it felt more like it was written for 14 to 16-year-olds. Did Cyber Tinker, if you pulled out the swears and the sex, like if you just removed the poly storyline and cleaned up their language a bit, you could have sold that very easily, very, very easily to a bunch of teenagers, and it would have been a really fun adventure.
I agree with that. And I think that for me specifically, in looking at Lightlark and the Cyborg Tinker, I think that we're missing out on some good YA and younger books because they're being inserted with the stuff that is unnatural to what the author naturally has in their style.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Cyborg Tinker was self-published. Lightlark was traditionally published. Why didn't they just tell her?
Because they wanted, I would assume
why didn't they tell her?
They wanted that TikTok audience.
They want the TikTok money.
Yeah.
So how much of that is the author not recognizing? Because I mean, I know that you've experienced the same thing that I have, where it's your book and you can't see it because it's your book. You're too close to it. So how much of that is the author being short-sighted, and how much of that is a publisher taking advantage of an existing Booktok sensation, because she was her first song or first single had just gone viral as well. So she was already blowing up on TikTok, and it just happened to coincide close enough with her looking to sell this book. You know, and so how much of that was the publisher trying to make a savvy business move and going, this sounds like a great idea, but it needs to be an adult book because that's where the money is.
I would put that on the publisher more than Alex, because I think when you're reading Lightlark, you can see that Alex had fun writing it and it was important to her. And I think she's talked about it being an idea that she had a long time ago even. So I think that she cared about it, but I don't think publishers so much care, because they change stuff from other people's books for other reasons entirely to be more marketable.
They do.
So, and then you have that with the Fourth Wing and the Iron
read that one
Wing.
yet.
I don't know. But the first book of that came out in May. The second book, like 750, 800 pages, came out last month. I think that is publishers taking advantage of writers who are popular on TikTok. And they don't really care about your longevity as an author or what you want to do as an author. They want to make that money.
They got to make it while the iron's hot.
And I think that's a shame for the people that if they cared about the books, that their books, that's the condition that they get to go out in.
So then the question is, how durable is that business model? Like the business model only works because people are buying the book. Well, so then you get into the whole like, and this is related to Booktok, but it's also just like publishing adjacent, right? So how much of that is people buy these books to hate read them? They buy them knowing they're not going to like them, because the purpose of buying it and reading it is to produce content about it. And angry, negative content, hate reading a book, is much more marketable from a clicks perspective, i.e. I can make money by saying bad things about your book perspective, than reading a book that you like and making a glowing review. And I'm sure that you've seen that as well, that your reviews that are harsher do better.
Yeah, because people that are angry about somebody or something are going to go try to find other people that feel the same way, because they're typically looking for somewhere to also express their negative feelings or see that other people have had the same thoughts.
Yeah, it's really hard for I tend to be a person who just enjoys books. Like I like everything. I'm not super critical. I like Lightlark. Not that doesn't mean that I didn't pick the shit out of it. Like there's all kinds of stuff in it that I didn't like, but in general, everybody's like, oh, it was such a bad book. I'm like, yeah, I really liked it. I thought it was fun. Deeply, deeply flawed, but I had fun reading it. Right. So to me, that makes it, I like it because I had fun reading it, even though I know objectively it was not executed well.
I mean, I get it. I love Empress Teresa, unironically, because it was a lot of fun to read.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I enjoyed Lightlark unironically. I genuinely liked the book. Yeah.
I totally get it, because I have my own, like, I know everybody hates this book, but this is a fun book. I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you.
It's objectively bad. I don't care. I like it anyway.
But see, like, and then maybe that's where we're also different, because I know that hate watching is a big thing. But I like to see how other people experience the same thing that I like. I don't look for people to experience the same thing I did. I want to see specifically why people felt differently about what I experienced. Yeah. Because I know that I read books in a very specific way, especially since I'm so character focused, and I don't trust the narrator of any book. You need to give me proof. But then that leads me to reading a book a completely different way than everybody else. And then I find it interesting to see what they took away versus what I took away.
Yeah. So
there's also, really quick on that.
Yeah, no,
you end up with more things to say when it's negative, because you want to point out all of the ways that you are unhappy. But if you were just having a good time, you're usually engulfed in the book.
Yeah. And
if you're angry, you're kind of nitpicking at literally every little thing that pisses you off.
Yeah. Yeah. So therein, I think, is a very stark way to illustrate the difference between BookTube, so book reviews on YouTube, and Booktok, which are short form, quick, very aesthetic. I find a lot of the YouTube reviews are very, very negative. They will pick apart every tiny thing. And I do it too. If there's a book I don't like, I don't like it. And I will tell you all the things about it I don't like. But they'll pick apart every tiny little thing about a book that could possibly have been wrong. Whereas on Booktok, the majority of the content that I have seen is the enthusiastic embrace of what they love, regardless of how it may be perceived by others. So you can look like the phenomenon with Ice Planet Barbarians, for example, that everybody's laughing at the people who are just waving these books around so super excited, like, oh, this is so much fun. And they're like, well, that's ridiculous. It's a big blue man with a tail and horns. Like he's running around in the snow naked. What are you doing? Like, that's ridiculous. And it's like, okay, yeah, but read it. It's really fun. Like, yeah, it's ridiculous, but it knows it's ridiculous. It's leaning into it. It's a good time, go read it. And that was basically my experience. And I found that I read that book, was expecting it to be terrible because of the reviews that I had watched on YouTube. And I had a really good time with it. And the difference is on Booktok, they enthusiastically embrace the things they love without shame. And they don't feel the need to pretend like something they enjoyed reading is bad just because it is objectively bad, because it is ridiculous, or the characters are flawed but not on purpose, or, you know, whatever it is. You know, if we're climbing walls with the spikes on our necklaces, like in Lightlark, which was so silly, I couldn't stand it. I literally like screamed and had to close the book and could not read anymore. I was so angry about that scene because she was like falling and like unclasped her necklace that had a little teeny tiny like 2-inch dagger and like dug it into a stone wall and caught herself from free falling. And I was so mad at the stupidity of it, I had to stop reading. But like, I still love the book. I like the book, you know, and TikTok will enthusiastically embrace the ridiculousness of that and love the book anyway. Love it in spite of itself. And YouTube will tear it apart.
Yeah, I don't really understand it because generally when I read things, like my 2 criteria I said earlier are character consistency and logic consistency. And I don't care how crazy your story gets. Empress Teresa is always my go-to just because it is so ridiculous. But it stays consistent within its own logic.
It's always ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of ridiculousness from start to finish.
But it stays within its own logic. So for Lightlark, I could have liked it and I wouldn't have had the problem with the dagger. I usually tell books,
oh, that drove me crazy.
If you're going to be ridiculous, go all the way ridiculous.
Go all the way.
Just go all the way. I loved Model Land, but people will have on YouTube just dragged it for how ridiculous it is. But it's like, bro, her name is Tookie De La Cream. What are you expecting?
Yeah.
It's going
what did you think was going to happen? It's written by Tyra Banks. It is written by Tyra Banks, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And so, like, I don't mind the ridiculousness. Take it all the way there, lean into it, and just have fun with it. It doesn't have to be academic. It doesn't have to be realistic. It just make me believe in this world that you created.
I think
some
a lot
people
of the
take
time
themselves too seriously and do try to impress their peers and don't want to be made fun of.
I think a lot of the time the folks on BookTube, I do think that that's what it is, that they're like, okay, I know that this is ridiculous. I actually had fun reading it, but I daren't say it out loud, lest I be judged.
That's why I just embrace being a cringe merchant. And you know what? You get what you get with me.
I was trying to explain to somebody the other day, because I mentioned, I'm like, oh, I've got this co-stream with a friend of mine on Sunday evening. And they're like, oh, who is it? And I'm like, hold on. And so I pulled up one of your videos where you're like wearing your Majima top. You like pull your shirt open and it's like all nipple. And I'm like, this is who I'm streaming with. And they're like, that's an interesting friend for you to have. You're so very different, you know, because I'm like very buttoned up sort of, you know. And I'm not once you get to know me, but I do come across that way as very like suburban housewife, sort of very corporate, you know. And I'm aware that that's the impression that I give. But yeah, I was trying to explain you to someone the other day, and that was
I think that's extra funny because I think we're actually opposites of each other, because I think I come off as very eccentric, but I'm actually really reserved.
Yeah.
And I almost always wear sweaters. Like I'm always very modest.
Yeah. And I'm the other way around. I come off as very reserved, and I think once you get to know me, I'm really not.
Yeah. But I think that's why we work.
Yeah.
I think we get it.
It's like puzzle pieces, dude. It's like puzzle pieces. All right. Now that we're done love bombing each other.
There's never enough. You know, we were just talking about how YouTube is fed on hate. We need to love bomb the site.
Yeah, can you feel the love tonight? Oh goodness. Okay, so do you have any closing remarks about so the title of the stream is Spicy BookTok Needs to Stop. And I think we're on the same page about there are certainly some behaviors that BookTok does, specifically like romance BookTok does, that we find abhorrent or distasteful or inappropriate. But that doesn't mean that the whole thing needs to be thrown out. I think that there is value in giving people who enjoy a thing that most people don't understand and are unwilling to engage with. I think there's value in giving them a place to go where they can participate with, interact with, and engage with other like-minded people who love the same thing. I think there's value in that. I think having a place where it's okay to go and say, you know what, I love Ice Planet Barbarians. I love Haunting Adeline. And to be able to do that without shame or judgment, I think that that's really important. I just wish we had the ability to respect other people's boundaries, to separate fact from fiction or reality from fiction, and maybe not sexualize teenagers. That would be great.
I think in general, when you create any sort of community or sub-community, it's always going to be up to that community to police itself and to set what the expectations. And if people come in, if you say that you've got an open mind and you're willing to tolerate like anything, there will always be somebody that sees that openness and sees, even maybe if you've got a group of misfits, they're going to see, oh, maybe I can get in here. And if it's somebody that makes you uncomfortable or that does not vibe with the other people, it's okay to community police and say, you're not okay here.
Yeah, we don't do that here.
This is how it is. And I think that's...
Or even, you're okay here, but we don't do that here.
Yeah.
You are welcome.
Yeah.
That behavior is not.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's always going to be a risk when you say that you have an open space, because there's going to be the people that don't know what the boundary is until they accidentally cross it. And then there's also going to be those that are malicious, that are looking for ways, like places to start building their stuff. So it's always going to be up to the community to police it. And like you were saying with them earlier, I don't think it's something that you should throw out, because it's a good thing to be able to find other people that you can have a community with and talk about these things with. Yeah. But you also have to remember to police that community. So if something happens, like going after the teenagers or going after the married man after he says no, you end that and you say, we don't do that here. If you're going to do that, you can't be here.
Yeah. I feel like they did. I feel like they came down on those comments and those commenters pretty hard. Yeah. I feel like there was no gingerness about it. There was no delicacy. There was no trying to spare people's feelings. They called the predatory behavior what it was. They called the inappropriate comments what they were. And I feel like they did police themselves. I was pretty impressed with BookTok's response. I think it's unfortunate that every non-TikTok media outlet I have seen cover it has not mentioned that.
And that's why I don't think that they should abandon it. Like some of them saying, hey, I don't want a part of this anymore. Yeah. I think that only leaves behind...
She's still active, by the way.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm giving encouragement to all of the good people in there, because I don't think the bad people in those communities define you. And I think that the good people and the ones that had a response and said, don't do this, are the ones that are defining what that community is going to be. And so if all of the good people go, I don't want to be associated with you, instead of kicking those people out, then you're going to leave that group together that are just going to continue that thing. Whereas if you community police, you can keep it a positive thing.
Well, and I think there are people who don't see the boundaries. I don't think it's malicious. I think it's ignorance, and they don't realize what they're doing is harmful. And I do think that there's merit in calling it out, because although it won't be the majority, there will be some who looked at that response and go, oh crap, they're right. This is not okay. Like this thing that I'm doing is not okay. And they will stop. Whereas if you just leave them to their own devices, they're going to keep doing it and the harm keeps happening.
Yep. That's why you generally do not assume malice at a first offense of something, because a lot of the time there is just ignorance, or they don't see the boundaries. You cannot see the boundaries if you've been in these abuse situations. Yeah. So you give people a chance, not so many chances that they end up abusing you.
Yeah, well, one's enough. When we're talking about sexually explicit comments being made towards a minor, I think one is more than generous.
Yeah.
Yeah. One strike and you're out.
Yeah. So mostly what can be done, just remember to keep an eye on the communities that you're involved with, and be compassionate and have grace to people that cross boundaries, but let them know. And
let them know it's not okay.
Yep. And if you see that violation again, cut it, make a statement.
Say something.
But don't let your heart get so hardened as well that you think everybody is dubious from the beginning, because that's just going to create an incredibly toxic environment to assume everybody is lying and mean from the beginning.
Yeah. No, I think that that's the right of it. I think leave yourself open to accepting new people. Understand that they're not going to be perfect and they're going to say and do things that you don't like. and don't be afraid to say, I don't like that. That's not okay. You need to stop. And if they don't, drag them out by their ear.
And if you're this other person that is receiving the, hey, can you not do that? It's not a statement against you. It's not saying that you're a bad person. It's just, we have different things that we like, and it's totally fine. And it's not a character judgment for us to like different things.
Yeah. No, nobody's judging you. We don't like that behavior. It needs to stop. All right. Ian, thank you so much for doing this with me. I had a heck of a good time. I hope you guys had something too. I've seen a lot of really insightful comments. I didn't get to pin them all. I do not multitask with language things very well. I can't listen and read at the same time and retain the information that's happening. So I'm sorry if I missed them. I will make sure that I leave the comments in the playback. And then once the video posts, I will put all of the links to all of the TikToks that we watched, and to World's channel as well will be in the description, so that if you liked what these folks had to say and you thought that they had a reasonable response, and you want to make sure that you support them, or you want to watch the clip for yourself or reference it yourself, I'll make sure that I include those links. So thank you guys so much for hanging out, and go check Ian out there. She's fantastic. And yeah.
Thank you for having me so much. It was a great talk, and I love talking to you and getting your perspective.
All right. We'll see you later. Bye,
Don't
guys.
die.
Yeah, no dying.